look now at Bleacher Report's top 10 NBA players based on several metrics through the All-Star break this season. Harden, LeBreezy, Westbrook, Giannis, Karl Anthony Towns, your top 5. KD is 10th. Two notables not on the list were Chris Paul and Kyrie Irving, who received honorable mentions. Stephen A., biggest issue with that list?
My biggest issue is that CP3 was not on that list. I don't know if anybody's been paying attention, but Chris Paul is an MVP candidate. He's not the MVP candidate that James Harden is. James Harden of the Houston Rockets is the leading candidate for league MVP right now. And if the vote were today, James Harden would be the league MVP. Chris Paul's in that conversation, though. Has anybody seen what they have done with him on the basketball floor? Has anybody seen how him and James Harden have flowed? Has anybody noticed that they haven't even lost more than 4 games together while they've been on the court? Chris Paul looks like a superstar. And oh, by the way, in case you haven't noticed, look at the Clippers without him. Okay? Because even though that Doc Rivers and Jerry West and those boys are still grinding and there's still an outside shot that they'll be in the playoffs, the bottom line is they are a completely different team and far less effective without Chris Paul than they were with him. And when I look at the way that he has been performing, it's not just about numbers, it's about leadership, and it's about giving you the impression that big things are going to happen just because you have arrived. That is what Chris Paul has done in Houston, and I don't see how he could have been left off that list.
Well, I do. How many games has he missed this year? A whole lot.
12 to 15, I think.
I think it's...
I'll double check. I'll double check.
It's a big number. He's played in 39 games.
Okay.
He's missed a lot of games, and that's all that is. The reason he's not on the list is because this is not subjective. It's based on different analytics that they run everyone through for total value. And Chris Paul, game for game. By the way, you say he plays like a superstar. You know why? Because he is a superstar. Chris Paul's one of the best players in the game. One of the best players ever. So sure, game for game, he's an MVP candidate. But if you miss a bunch of games, and other guys...
He's missed 18.
18 games. You miss 18 games and you played in 39. It's a huge percentage of the season. You can't be an MVP. I mean, you know, like, you'd have to be twice as good as everyone else, which he's not. He's just about as good as anyone else. That's why he's not top 10. By the way, what I find really interesting about the list is Karl Anthony Towns cracked the top 5. And if you recall, coming out of college, everyone knows, like, wow, Karl Anthony Towns is going to be amazing and everything. His defense lagged behind until recently, you know, because he looked like he was going to be a really good NBA defender, and he is turning into one. And when you combine that with his offense, Karl Anthony Towns, who is the guy you would want, including Kristaps Porzingis and everyone, that was the guy based on injury history, based on level of play, the whole thing, that you would want out of that draft, and it is turning out that way. You know, we talk a lot about Embiid and until recently Porzingis, of course, and Anthony Davis and everything, but there's Karl Anthony Towns pops up in the top 5 already, and you know what? He deserves it.
What about... Or did you want to comment?
No.
I was going to ask you about KD at 10.
Listen, I can't rule out anything about Karl Anthony Towns because he's special and he's still developing. I like what I see. Once upon a time, I thought Jahlil Okafor, because I'm looking at a back-to-the-basket player that could average 20 and 10, even though I think that he was misused and mistreated in Philadelphia. The bottom line is he is no Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns is special, and he deserves our credit. I just don't know about the top 5 as of yet.
What about Durant at 10?
That makes no sense to me. That makes no sense.
Listen, there's one basketball and a bunch of guys sharing it, and basketball is the most dynamic of all the American team sports. And so to isolate value is sometimes very difficult. It really depends. You know, the value to the team has to do with the system you're in, how well you fit it, what your usage rate is, etc., and not always actually intrinsically how good you are. In other words, James Harden comes out #1 here. If Mike D'Antoni had LeBron James in that system, do I believe LeBron James would be #1 according to these numbers? Yeah, by a lot. So it's not really gauging the intrinsic value of every player. It's trying to gauge, what they're trying to do here is gauge actually the contributions on the court of each player, and that's dependent upon things more than just
like
themselves.
The talent they're with. Kyrie Irving, though, that doesn't surprise you guys?
Well, listen, the way I look at it, here's my whole point. Kyrie Irving should have been in the conversation considering the MVP caliber year he was having just until a couple of weeks ago. Kevin Durant is one of the top 2 players in the game. I think it's sacrilegious and blasphemous. Somebody's got him as ranked 10 on any list when it comes to the sport of basketball. How the hell can you be #2 in the world, or arguably number 2 or 3 in the world, but you're number 10 on this list? Give me a break. That makes no sense whatsoever at all. So I look at it from that perspective. Of course, I got other issues with the list, but I'm saying that Chris Paul is an MVP candidate. He
game
really,
for game, Stephen.
really. Well, listen,
game for
listen,
game.
listen.
But of all the years
I'm not arguing the 18 games. I understand, but to me, that's the only argument that can be made against.
Of course, and I bet
when he's on the court, he's had more of an impact than some of those people on that list, and that's the way I was looking at it. I was thinking about the 18 games missed.
I guarantee you, if they broke this down on a per-game basis, Chris Paul would be in this top 10. According to these metrics, I bet you he'd be in the top 5. I mean, Chris Paul is having an outstanding year, partly because they can use him as a guy who can cut to the basket and stuff. Like, he can actually be a scorer. Chris Paul is a great scorer and just can't always be used that way. But with Harden, when Harden's on ball, Chris Paul can be used that way. So there's no doubt that game for game, he's in the top 10. Just missed 18 games, brother. By the way, what this list shows, and especially the names that are not on this list, has there ever been a time in NBA history where there's been this much talent in the league? This is absurd. It's absurd. And I got a final take coming for you guys pretty soon on the big man. You know how everyone says, oh, the big man, what happened to the big man? We are in, by far, the golden era of the big man, and no one seems to know it.
Looking forward to it. We got more to get to, guys, on the association. Mark Cuban has had his fair share of success both on and off the court, but find out why Stephen A. thinks Cuban deserves more criticism lately. A lot to discuss there. And Dak Prescott is called out after a sophomore slump last season. Find out who says the Cowboys quarterback can't use excuses heading into year 3 in Big D. Keep it locked.
Amazing, we maneuvered through the fake things, labels kept giving us.
A lake of fish, and one of them has a genetic mutation.